Hello makers, and welcome to SheerStitchery. I'm Catherine Harris, and if you're new here, we do sewing and DIY tutorials every week, so smash that subscribe button down below. This week I wanted to do a pattern review as well as a sew along for the Ellie and Mac Be Bold summer dress or tunic. So let's get to it. Now first off, I wanted to start off with a quick pattern review. So this pattern is actually very simple and quick to sew up, and I would imagine you could do it within an afternoon. Now that being said, I did find the instructions a little bit fiddly going around with all of the different views. Now it wasn't necessarily as clear which step you should be working on for each point. I decided I was going to make the flounce top version then with the long dress, so I just skipped on over to that, but it turns out that there were some steps that I needed to do in a prior portion, so just directing those steps might be a bit difficult if you are new to reading patterns. That being said, it's pretty intuitive in how it all comes together. There are only a few simple seams, so it is a very basic sew as well, and I'm sure you could figure that out. Plus, I've got a sew along for you here, and if you'd like to see any of the other versions, do let me know in the description down below, and I'll see if I can get some other versions out there for you as well. Perhaps the split ruffle top with the button placket, because that is a little bit different than some of the other versions. Now, this pattern does come with a lot of different views that you can choose from, going from a tunic style top, a crop top, as well as a full dress version. Then you also have a couple of different sleeve options with no flounce, adding the flounce, which I chose to do, and then also having the button placket that has a split flounce in the top because of course it has to split for the button placket. Now, in terms of fit, this fits fairly easily. Now, it's something that you don't need to really worry about fit much because it is made oversized and it's elastic. So it can fit a wide variety of size, shapes, and bodies within that one size range. But one thing I did want to mention is you kind of have to wear it off the shoulder. When I do try to pull it up over my shoulder, what ends up happening is sometimes this side will like flip down and it's not nearly as comfortable. Now, I'm the type of person, I do like having straps here, but if you don't mind having a cute little off the shoulder top bit, this is really cute in summer. I always find, even though it's like stretchy, when it's off the shoulder, I'm always worried about like lifting my arms, which I think is my own neuroses there, but I just thought I would throw that in as well. Now, going back to where we had some of the instructions, I did notice that it didn't actually talk about hemming the skirt version at all in the instructions. I went back and I read through it a couple times, and I know that's pretty intuitive, but it was a step that probably should have been written down. It's a super easy, I just did a double fold hem. You could hem it really any which way you wanted to, but I thought I would throw that in as well. Now, if you're wondering where I got this fabric from, I actually got this fabric from Thread Crate along with the pattern because it was May's pattern. So I thought I would do this up and share it with you. And so now that we have chatted a wee bit about the pattern itself, let's get into the sew along. So step number one is the bodice. So we're going to take the front and back bodice pieces and place them right sides together, lining up the side seams. I like to pin the bottom and the top and then go in with pins along here, and then we're going to do the same thing along the other side. And once we have that done, we are going to stitch those in place. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to press the seams towards the back bodice. Now, the front and the back are the exact same, so you just need to pick a side. And once we have that done on the one side, we are going to press it towards the back, whichever one you decided, on the other side. And then once that is done, you can start to see how the armhole is created. So we're going to have to finish this edge, and we're going to do that by pressing under a narrow double hem. So I'm going through with the first hem here, and then I'm just going to fold that over one more time, and I'm doing about 1/4 of an inch here, and I'm just eyeballing it. If you really want to be precise, you could measure this. once we have that pressed on the one side, then we are going to stitch that in place. So you can see that I have stitched it on both sides here. And number 2 is the optional flounce ruffle. So if you're adding that flounce, you are going to place both pieces of the flounce right sides together. And then you are going to stitch them, and there is a top and a bottom. The top is more narrow than the bottom, so just make sure that they are facing the correct direction here. And then once we have that pinned, we are going to stitch that in place, and I am just serging these to finish the seams on this. But you could use a zigzag on your domestic sewing machine as well. And next up, we are just going to press that. And once again, I am pressing towards the back of my flounce, and I'm just going to position that seam towards the back when I place it on. Now we're going to finish the under edge here, which is going to be the larger size. So the one that has the larger circumference around is going to be the bottom of the flounce, and we are going to do another narrow double hem, just like we did on the underarm seam to finish that. So I'm just going to do this all the way around the outside edge of this flounce and stitch it in place. And it should look just like this. Next, we need to quarter our flounce. So I am just folding it in half on where each of the seams lie, and I'm matching up those 2 seams in the center, and then we can find the quarter points here. And I'm just going to mark those quarter points with a water-soluble marker here. And then we are going to do the same thing with quartering our bodice front and back. So we have our 2 side seams here that are going to match up, and we're just going to mark the center front and center back of our bodice here. So by doing this, we're going to ensure that the flounce is completely centered on our bodice, because the flounce actually acts as part of the sleeve here. So we're going to place this with the right side of our bodice facing up and the right side of our flounce facing up. So the wrong side of our flounce is facing the right side of our bodice, just as it were to lie. So it's not right sides together. First, I am going to pin the center front of the flounce and bodice piece, and then I am going to match up along the top of the bodice, and you don't need to stretch anything here. It's a woven, it's not going to stretch anyway. You're just going to lie that nice and flat. And then you're going to repeat that exact same process along the back, pinning this in place. And then we're going to sew it using our domestic sewing machine just along the top and the bottom, and then go over the entire thing with your overlocker or zigzag stitch just to finish those edges so they don't fray, going all the way around. And it should look just like this once it has all been attached. Now for number 3, the neckline elastic casing. So with this, we are going to fold towards the wrong side of our bodice. And I am just using my easy press because it's easy to really get a nice accurate measurement here, but we're measuring out about 1 inch. So from the edge here, and this is going to form the casing for our elastic. And I'm just pressing that, going all the way around this, and it gets a little bit fiddly going to those underarm transition areas, just because you've got a decent amount of fabric bulk here. Just make sure that you don't have any puckers. Once you've got that pressed, I like to secure it in place with some pins. That being said, if your fabric presses quite well, you could just pop on over to the sewing machine and stitch that casing in place. But I always like to say, pin twice and you won't have to unpick later. So I am going to add these pins in here. And once we have all of the pins in, then we're going to stitch our casing. But don't forget to mark a small opening about 2 inches wide where we're going to insert our elastic. So stitch all the way around, leaving that opening. So it should look just like this, with a little opening in here. Next, we are going to take our elastic, which the size is cut based on the pattern requirements, and I'm going to place 2 safety pins on. So one is going horizontally and one is going vertically. So the one that is in line with the elastic gets fed through. The other one acts as a stopper because the elastic is smaller than the overall casing. We don't want to lose it inside. And I am just going to feed this all the way through until we get to the opening. And once we get to the opening here, then I am going to pull it out, from here, and it is a bit fiddly because you do have a number of layers in there and sometimes you can get it fed in between. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay them just as I had pulled them out and place them together with the safety pin. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because I want to double check to make sure my elastic did not get twisted as I was feeding it through the casing. So right here, I'm just going along and feeling my elastic to ensure that nothing has been twisted. And once I've confirmed that, then you can head to your sewing machine and zigzag it in place, and then feed it back in and just do a quick straight stitch to close that gap. And the top of our flounce is complete and should look just like this. And you can see we have formed our armhole right here with the flounce. And now we can move on to step number 4, which is the skirt. So with the skirt, we are going to place the skirt front and back, right sides together. And we are going to begin pinning them together so that we can stitch them. Once again, I like to start at the top and the bottom and then distribute those pins in between. And once we have the one side done, we are just going to stitch that and serge it. And then we are going to repeat this process for the other side. And once it's done, it should look like this. And then we are going to find the center front and center back of our skirt by folding it in half and just marking that with our water-soluble pencil. Then we are going to do the exact same thing on our bodice so that we can find that center front and center back points. Then we're going to place the skirt and the bodice right sides together. So with this, we're going to place the bodice inside the skirt and both of our right sides are facing each other. First thing I like to match up are the side seams. So I'm just matching up the side seams and making sure that I am nesting those seams. So my bodice seam is facing towards the back, and on my skirt seam, it is going to be facing towards the front. So you get a nice crisp join there and you don't have any offset of those seams. Once you have the side seams pinned, now we're going to match up the center front and center back hash points that we had just measured out. And then I like to go in and distribute the rest of that fabric evenly on the inside, just getting it all nice and pinned. And you don't need to stretch any of this. Now the pattern pieces fit perfectly between them, so you shouldn't have any excess on here. And once it is all pinned, then you're going to head over to your sewing machine, stitch around it, and then serge or seam finish the edge. Next, moving in from the seam line, you're going to mark 1 inch below that seam line and stitch all the way around. This is going to create our casing. So the bottom half of the casing at least. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to head over to our pressing mat and we are going to press that casing up towards the bodice of our dress. So you're just going to go in with a light amount of steam and press that up. And then once it is done being pressed, what we're going to do is we are going to mark our top channel for our casing. And I'm just marking here about 2 inches where we need to leave it open so we can insert our elastic. So we have that casing all done, and just as we did with the top neckline, we are going to feed that elastic through the center seam here on our waist so we can create a nice elasticized waistband for our dress, which also makes this a very comfortable dress. And once you have it fully fed through, you're going to pull the elastic out and join them together just as you would if you were going to take it to the sewing machine and sew it. So a nice flat overlap, and attach that with the safety pin and then go through on that elastic and double check to make sure nothing is twisted. There is nothing worse than having a twisted elastic in your waistband. You are going to feel that and it is going to be incredibly uncomfortable and will drive you bonkers, and you'll end up unpicking those stitches. Stitch that together and then close up that seam on the inside right here where you left the hole. And now on to step number 5, which is the hem. So with the hem here, I decided to do a narrow double fold hem just because this skirt is a wee bit shorter. It's a nice summer dress and I didn't want to do any large hems because it would make it a little too short for my liking. So once you have that all pressed, you're just going to stitch that and your hem should look just like this. And essentially your dress is all completed and ready for you to wear. And now that we are all done stitching up the bead bowl dress, you can go out and rock it. I think this is a great quick sew and perfect for a travel dress, especially in summer if you're heading out to the lake or for a picnic, because it is so comfortable with that elastic stretch in both the waistband as well as the top shoulder. So do let me know what you think and if you have any requests for other patterns that you would like me to do. Until next time, makers, let's get our sewspiration on.